Good morning. Well, for the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at the book of Revelation and working our way through that, seeing what it is that is prophesied there and what John was trying to show to the church throughout the ages, about the time which is to come. It's a hard book, and it was a difficult book to look at. It is hard to understand how all the different images fitted together. It's also hard to go through the experience of knowing what is coming and praying for the people of that age that they would make right decisions and correct decisions when faced with such overwhelming calamities. But today I'm come to another part, and again I'm going to start a series in a sense. I could have gone back to the lectionary and just taken the scriptures for each particular day. But instead, I'm going to look at the Gospel of Luke and the writings of Luke. There's a Gospel, of course, and there's the Acts of the Apostles. And I'm just going to browse, if you like, in the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles, not, I can assure you, taking it verse by verse. If I did that, well, we'd probably be here for the rest of the year. But I am going to look at it, and I'm going to show you how this Gospel was written and why it was written. Now that's an important thing, the why it was written. Let's look first of all, for instance, at the Gospel of John. John, at the end of his Gospel, tells us a simple truth, which we sometimes miss. And that is that these things are written. But if you recorded all the things that Jesus said, and all the things that he did, then he said he didn't think the very world would be able to hold all the books that contained the sayings and the actions of Jesus. And what we must remember is that if we take all his sayings and all the actions recorded to us in the different Gospels, well, we could enact them all in just a couple of days. And Jesus' ministry, of course, took 3.5 years. Just think of all the other different things which we don't have any record of. These things occurred, but there's no actual record of them. One interesting thing Jesus says on one occasion, he says, talking about the miracles, he says, if the miracles had been done in Chorazin and Bethsaida, had been done in Sodom and Gomorrah, they would have repented. But you know, there's no record of any miracles taking place in Bethsaida or in Chorazin. No record at all. All of these are just set aside, and we don't know what he said, and we don't know what he did. So if you take all the sayings of Jesus, as John says, well, there'd be innumerable books, but we just have a few of his sayings. And these sayings and these actions were chosen by the different evangelists in order to express the message that they wanted to put over. Let's look first of all, for instance, at Peter. Peter dictated the Gospel of Mark to Mark, and Mark wrote it down. It's believed that this was the first of the Gospels. Now, this Gospel of Mark starts with the baptism of John. Doesn't start with the birth narratives. It starts with the baptism of John. Why? Well, this is when Peter came into contact with Jesus first. And if he's going to be a true witness, then he's going to record the things he saw and the things that he remembers. He didn't know Jesus in his childhood. He didn't know him before this event. But when Peter and Andrew went to visit John the Baptist, who was preaching in the wilderness, that is when they met up with Jesus. And so Peter, dictating the Mark, starts that Gospel of Mark with the baptisms of John and takes it from there right to the end of the Gospel. Now, I think that the second Gospel written was probably the Gospel of Luke. Why is that? Well, again, if you compare the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew, you find that very often things are put in a simple manner in Luke's Gospel and are then almost developed in the Gospel of Matthew. See, I believe Jesus gave what we know as the Sermon on the Mount, probably several times. In Luke, we are told he was on a plain. In Matthew, we're told he was on a mountain. But as you look at this, what Jesus is saying, somehow the whole thing is developing. For instance, in Luke's Gospel, it says, blessed are the poor. In Matthew's Gospel, it says, blessed are the poor in spirit. In Luke's Gospel, it says, blessed are those who are hungry. In Matthew's Gospel, it says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You see, there is a development. And that's why I believe probably that Luke's Gospel was written second after Mark, and then Matthew came after that. So we look at these different Gospels, and as we go on, we're going to examine them and see what they say. But primarily, we are focusing on the Gospel of Luke. Amen.